Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today I've got a guest in the house. You want to introduce yourself to everybody?
I'm Quinn. I'm 18.
The first question that I thought I'd ask you is a little bit about where you're from, your family, and just a bit of background about you would be a nice kind of backdrop for this interview.
I was born in Canada, and I was born in New West, and my family's always lived in the Lower Mainland. But I come from a lower income family. We've always kind of struggled with keeping food on the table and maintaining rent, and it's just been like that my whole life. I'm trying to because none of my parents ever graduated high school. My mom, my dad, even my stepdad were all high school dropouts. So they've all just maintain living off of nearly minimum wage jobs. Some nights my mom would be like, oh, we might have to go live on the streets, or she'd tell me as a kid oh, we're probably gonna have to go move in the homeless shelter. I just hear that a lot, and that would just make me very sad as a kid.
You've kind of told me about your background in terms of family and the difficulty growing up the way you did, and I'm curious about the possible toll that may have taken, or what was your mental health like as a young kid growing up?
Mental health when I was growing up was pretty bad. I felt for the most part I had no one to go to, because I didn't really have a strong connection with my parents ever. A lot of abuse and neglect when I was younger. We never kind of formed a family kind of bond. So I never felt like I could go to them for help, and so I felt very depressed and alone when I was in my younger teen years.
How did you deal with some of the depression and some of the mental health challenges you had? How did you handle them?
I would just kind of rebel, I guess, to relieve my stress and anger. I would maybe vandalize something, or egg someone's house, or just do bad steal.
And when you rebelled, did that make you feel better? What was it about rebelling why was it the activity you turned to? What was the reward you gained out of that?
It kind of gave me that fuck you to my parents, I guess. I don't know, I just felt like I was getting back at them by doing all this.
What I'm curious about, and feel free to kind of correct me, and maybe I'll be direct with the question here. Did you find drugs at this particular time as well, or was it just at the time just rebelling and just vandalizing stuff?
At the time, I was doing a couple drugs. I was doing a lot of weed, and I was taking shrooms every night.
Can you take me back to maybe the first time that you did, maybe if you remember how old you were, that you did weed, and maybe talk me through your journey and the evolution of sort of the drugs that you partook in over the years.
So my first time smoking weed, I was 13. I was about to turn 14. And I was at school, and this guy just came up to me. He's like, "You want some weed?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'll give you this weed for $10." I was like, "Yes," because I'd always wanted to do weed because my parents did weed a lot. They smoked a lot, and all my friends would talk about these cool experiences they had when they smoked weed. So I got this weed, and I went to my friend's house. He's like, "Yo, I got weed, bro. Let's smoke." He's like, "Oh, all right." So he puts it in his pipe, and we smoked it. I remember just sitting on his couch for 2 hours just giggling at nothing, bro. It was fun.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought oh, weed isn't even that bad, right? So I would just do it every now and then. And then as time went on, the same kind of cycle happened. I heard my parents tried shrooms, and my friends were trying it, and they're like, "Oh, this was crazy. We did this, we did that." It was the crazy, and I kind of felt like I was missing out. They were telling me about all these crazy experiences they had and all these colors they were seeing. I was like, I just kind of made me feel like I was missing out on something. So then I tried shrooms a couple times, I think 15. So far I've done weed, shrooms, and then I've done cocaine, Molly, and DMT. I would get offered cocaine a lot, and I would just say like no, because I didn't want to get addicted.
Yeah.
And then it was like a year ago, my friend told me like he got a DMT pen, and like it was like a small high, like it lasts you like 5 minutes. I was like, might as well try it just for the one time, because it's not gonna be too crazy, and it's only gonna be 5 minutes, and then after that I'm gonna just be like done with trying drugs.
Okay. So, when you tried cocaine at parties, knowing that there's potential for contaminated drugs and some of the other stuff at parties, what made you accept to try cocaine, especially at parties?
Well, I didn't really consider the risk, and I thought like, I don't know, at the time I kind of thought it'd be cool if I did cocaine.
Obviously, you described a period of 5 years here where you took drugs of different sorts. My question is, do you live with any of your parents, or do you at least communicate with both of them? Your mom and your dad, or just your mom you talk to?
I live with my mom. I haven't seen my dad in like a couple years, like 8 years.
Okay. So, was she aware that you were smoking or doing drugs?
Yeah, she was, and she didn't really care. She just said like, don't overdo it.
So, being where you are right now, what do you wish she would have done?
I wish I didn't do any drugs, cause especially when I was smoking, I just like didn't care about anything, my health, school, or anything. Like when I would smoke, I would just sit down, like watch YouTube, eat snacks. I wouldn't do any homework, and then I'd smoke in school too. So I wasn't paying attention to classes, and I used to be like a like straight B, almost sometimes I get an A student, right? But when I started like getting into smoking weed, like my grades were plummeting, and like I just stopped kind of caring about school and a bunch of other things that were really important.
Right. But more so, I'm interested in what do you wish your mom, because she's the one you live with, how do you wish she would have responded when she found out?
I wish she would have like gave me like a pretty harsh punishment, like grounded me. Oh, you can't like go to this person's house anymore because I know they're a bad influence on you. Or like if I catch you doing this again, it's like no video games for like a month. This stuff like more harsh than just kind of like a slap on the wrist.
Do you think it would have stopped you?
No.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at here is maybe just to zoom out of your case now. There's young people going to parties, going to high school, going to all sorts of social events where they meet other young people, where there's peer pressure to do drugs. How can we as a society better prevent people of your age from getting into these substances too early?
I think the best way would kind of be like to limit the people that are actually getting this substance, like kind of like, cause like anyone can get weed if they're over 19, right? I feel like it should be more of like, we should kind of go back to how it was before, where you needed like a medical card or you needed like a medical reason to get weed.
Right.
Because any 19-year-old can just buy an ounce of weed, hand it off to some 16-year-old at their school and be like, sell this, you get this cut, I get this cut, right? So I feel like just limiting the amount of people that can actually buy these legalized drugs would have a great effect on how, like, preventing kids from getting their hands on it.
Well, see, here's where people will say, well, teenagers, if they want to get drugs, will get drugs. And if you don't legalize it and you don't make it easier for them to get it the right way from good sources, then they're going to go to the black market, and that's where they can potentially put themselves in harm's way and get contaminated drugs, right? And that's where you get overdoses.
I guess to prevent kids, because like a lot of drug deals go down in schools. So one of my old schools that I had, where like everyone was like selling drugs, they'd get police there like weekly, and they'd have like dogs go around the school, like these drug dogs that would like go up to all the lockers, go up like in classes to make like kind of like try to find drugs. Because of that, a lot less kids are actually bringing drugs to school, and so it was a lot harder to like sell to other kids. So I feel like that could help, just having like a drug search every now and then.
Okay. So why do you think that more and more kids are so interested in drugs?
Well, there's a lot to that. It could be like their parents, it could be friends, but I think one of the bigger reasons, because like nowadays a lot of kids are listening to like rap music and like looking up to these rappers, and like almost all these rappers are just talking about smoking weed, doing drugs and all that. So like I feel like that's a huge influence on kids nowadays.
Right. Okay. So in this kind of situation where you've got peer pressure, you've got social media influences, and because weed is legal, parents are allowed to smoke. Sometimes parents don't necessarily try and like hide. Do you think that maybe making drugs a bit more shameful, if we can control the openness, do you think that that can potentially have an impact on young people being more affected in terms of being more easily influenced to do drugs?
Definitely, yeah. 'Cause one of the bigger reasons why I like started smoking is because when I had a stepdad, like he would smoke weed all the time, like in front of me, and he didn't really care. And, like when I'd go visit my grandpa, he'd just be smoking weed in front of me, and that kind of like made me think like, oh, if these guys are just smoking weed, and like I'd see how it would affect them. It just kind of made me feel like maybe weed isn't this like really bad drug, and it like kind of made me feel more comfortable with trying it. So I feel like, yeah, not like you should try to hide that you're smoking weed, not like try to smoke so publicly, because you might like influence kids into thinking like it's not that bad.
Some people say mental health is the reason why a lot of these people abuse drugs. And some other people on the other side of the argument say, you know what, the drugs came before the mental health deterioration. Where do you land on that argument?
I definitely lean more towards mental health causing drug addictions.
Right.
I've met a lot of teenagers who kind of grew up like with a rougher lifestyle.
Right.
And the ones who usually are more sad or depressed or have more mental problems are usually the ones who are like doing the harder drugs to cope with that. So like I've met a bunch of people who like maybe in an abusive household their whole life, and then like they'll like start doing cocaine and all that just to like kind of like cope with it. But like with someone who's like, I guess maybe like a less rough of a household, or maybe like they might just do something like weed. I think the reason young people do drugs is, for one, it's certain drugs can make you feel a lot more relaxed, so it takes like the stress of school off your back. But another major reason is I feel like because like you're a kid and you're like doing these things you shouldn't be doing. You feel good like rebelling, I guess, or like doing all these like bad things that you know you're not supposed to do. It just feels like empowering as a teenager.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you a bit of a policy question, right? Weed is obviously legal in Canada, right? And there's talk of like decriminalization of other drugs like psilocybin and the others. Like I think maybe even cocaine has been decriminalized, right? What do you think of the sort of the free market, I say that in quotes here, availability of drugs, and the possibility that these drugs can be in the hands of kids?
I mean, yeah, when weed was legalized, like in my school, like especially right when weed was legalized, like every kid was like getting their hands on weed, because you'd have like one guy who had graduated, he'd buy a bunch of weed, sell it to like or give it to these high schoolers, and these high schoolers would distribute it around high school and give it the money back to these like more grown guys. So like when you legalize something, like it just opens up a whole new market for these like students or kids that want to try it.
As a teenager who went through, basically, weed has been legal for what, 5 years now?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, you've grown through your teenage years, through legalization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually curious here. Do you think that the legalization has it served the purpose? Has it been good? Or do you find more and more kids are getting into and abusing more substances because it's legal and it's available?
Well, I think in general, I don't think the legalization of weed was necessarily bad. But with kids, yeah, no, that's when you smoke weed and you realize it's like, oh, it's not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
You like someone might introduce you to like another drug that might be a little harder, like shrooms. And you're like, oh, I've tried weed. Weed wasn't that bad.
Mm-hmm.
What if I tried this drug? It probably won't be as bad as everyone makes it out to be. Or what if I try this one?
Have you found that a lot of people over time have, like a lot of the friends you've grown up with, have been able to kind of like, as you grow older, you're just like, okay, I've had my fun. The rebellion is done. I'm growing older now. I don't need these drugs as much.
I mean, I'm at that decision, right? Well, I've made that decision. Yeah, I don't do that, but I find it very rarely that I'll see another person my age or a little younger than me make that decision. I only know one person who ever has. The rest of my friends who ever tried smoking weed are still smoking nearly every day to this day.
And do you find that, I mean, a lot of people say there's clearly benefits for some people in depression, and psilocybin for people with PTSD and all of that stuff. There's a lot of science behind that. But as a young person growing up in this era, would you say the benefit of it to those people who benefit from it outweighs the cost of potentially a new generation coming up of people who can potentially be addicted to substances in general?
I don't think so, 'cause I don't ever really see anyone benefiting from taking these drugs. And when I see like a drug like shrooms get in the hand of kids, or like kids my age, they'll like try it once and they'll keep like trying it and trying it again to see like try like higher and higher doses. Like they might mix like shrooms with weed or something. Like I tend to find nobody really uses it for its like intended benefits. We should have that old system we used to have before weed was completely legalized, where you needed like a prescription to have to use that drug, and I think like a background check should be done to make sure like you're not gonna go like pretend to be sick or something and get like an ounce of weed and go sell it to like some high schoolers or someone on the street.
How would you tackle the mental health crisis?
We need more counselors or more therapists to maybe cut down the price. Because I've tried to get counseling before. So I was in like a dark spot, and
right
when I tried to sign up, like I had to be interviewed by them, and by the end of the interview, they're like, "All right, we'll know." Like email you when we can get you in our system. They put me on a wait list for over a year, and then only gave me like 2 weeks to show up when I was like working. So they just, after waiting like over a year to get on this list, they just kicked me off. Told me like I'd have to wait another year to get in. The mental, like the support around here for like counselors or therapists is very weak. I guess what I'm trying to do now is just keep myself constantly staying productive instead of like slacking off and like feeding my brain dopamine by doing all these like meaningless things. I'm trying to like stay as productive as possible to get back into that like working mindset for school.
Right. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Wolf of Young Street podcast. If you derived value from this podcast, please don't forget to subscribe. I would love to hear from you as well. So please comment your thoughts down below.